Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 10th and the last episode of this series in conversation with. Today, I will be in conversation with my colleague Dalibor Šandor from Per.Art group in Novi Sad in Serbia. Hello, Dalibor.
Hello, Saša.
Dalibor, when we were preparing for this talk, I asked you in which language should we do this talk, because English is not yours nor mine native language. And then you said, let's do it in English.
Yes.
So we will hopefully have translation. We will ask then Frosina, our colleague, to translate this into Serbo-Croatian, so our colleagues can also follow the talk. And we will do it then also for these other colleagues and audiences who are listening and watching us, who in the international performing art scene also speak English. But Dalibor, this made me think about something, because I know that you learned English by yourself.
Yes.
I also learned in school, but mainly I learned more when I started to work as an artist, because in the international contemporary dance scene, somehow English is the main language. So those who don't speak English, they have a problem. And I was thinking about this norm. And I would like to ask you, what do you think about this norm? And what happens with those who are out, who cannot participate because they don't speak English? And what do you think we can do to change this and to have more languages and more diversity in our field of contemporary dance and performance?
Well, our friends that don't know how to speak in English, they are somehow excluded from this conversation in a sense that they do not understand word out of it. And I was thinking of the ways how can we include them. We can include them with translation, and also if they know someone who can speak English, he or she can tell them what was the conversation about it.
And how about, for example, outside of this conversation, for example, when we make performances in the studio or in the theater, what about this norm that English is the main language? What do you think about this?
Interesting question. Well, if there is English, if there is a theatrical performance with just English language, for example, I think that good idea would be to have headphones with automatic translation to other languages.
Mm-hmm.
But about these headphones, I know that it is somehow a problem, because there is a question how much they cost, and also there is a question what about the persons who are having trouble with hearing,
Mm-hmm.
and also with seeing. What about them?
So what you are saying is interesting, because this questioning this norm of the language, English language being dominant, we need to really then think of all these different levels of access and how to make it possible for more diverse group of participants.
Yes.
And this, when you say the question of like how much it costs, that maybe we need also more people as translators or assistants, also different also ways to make the language accessible. It is something that then really tells us that we need to rethink how do we make dance and how do we make theater, because we would need more new people and new ways of rehearsing and making and presenting performances.
Yes, new ways and also new way of organizing these things.
In which sense? This is an interesting point.
Well, in a sense, about the time limit. What is the time limit? For example, if the theater cannot buy these headphones, mm-hmm. For example, there are live translators. There also needs to be time to let them translate, mm-hmm. because if there is no time to translate to others, then it is like the translators are not here actually.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so it also, we need to plan enough time to give also for translations to be ready. For example, like for this talk that you and I are now recording, we need to think how much time and what means we have, so Frosina can prepare it for others to have access.
Yes, and we also need to think about it to tell the sentences clearly and little bit shorter than anticipated. For example, because
yeah,
for example,
interesting.
I like to sorry to interrupt you. I like to explain a lot.
I understand. I also tend to talk a lot while I think. So this is an interesting comment, an important comment that also when we speak and when we think, that we also keep in mind of most diverse audiences who will listen to us, so that then the thought doesn't get lost.
Yes, yes.
But Dalibor, I was also thinking the other day, now it's you and me making this talk and making it as an interview, and we are going to present it as a video on our page. But 5 years ago, we did something similar. If you remember, I did an interview, video interview with you. And then this video we presented in Geneva at the symposium. You remember?
Yes, I remember.
And that video was presented to the audiences, but also you were live present in the audience. And from the video, you send a message that audience should look for you and find a way to continue the conversation live with you, right?
Yes.
And in that video, you, I asked you if you would make a performance, what would it be? You remember?
Yes, I remember.
Can you maybe say for everyone who is watching and listening, like what was your idea 5 years ago? What performance it would be?
Well, my idea 5 years ago for the performance was that the performance would be called "We Are Not Monsters." Why? Because us disabled persons are sometimes, I mean, I cannot say just sometimes, but many times are perceived are like some kind of monsters. Plus, I like horror stuff.
And then this was the idea. And then I thought, okay. And then we talked about it to see how to make this possible. And then it took us almost 5 years to make it possible. Because in Geneva, back then, you also met with Xavier Leroy and Scarlett Yu, artists who were also part of the symposium. And you had, if I remember, you had an interesting conversation with them. And from that moment, because they were also interested in this idea, and they said to you, you should continue and you should not give up. You should make this performance. And then from that moment, for me, it was interesting as your colleague, it was interesting for me to try to find a way how this collaboration can happen. Because usually it's very difficult to bring different artists with different backgrounds, with different careers and experiences, also who speak different languages, to bring them together and to make a performance together. And then it took us some time, but we made it possible. In December last year, there was a premiere of your performance, We Are Not Monsters, and it was made based on your idea. And in collaboration, you worked together with Xavier Leroy, Scarlett Yu, Alexander Ashur, Olivera Kovacevic-Zemlyansky, and myself. You, together with us, artistically directed and prepared this whole performance. Marcel Bugil and Frosina Dimovska also collaborated with us, and all other members of our group, both with and without learning disabilities. So all of us premiered this performance. I am saying this and mentioning all this process and all these people, because I would like to ask you, what do you think about collaboration and collaborative work in making art? What is the quality that you find especially present and important in collaborative, inclusive work?
Well, about the collaborative work, I think that it is really good, and I think it's really good because especially because for example, if the other artist with which I collaborate has more experience, he or she can tell me his or her experience. So in a way, we exchange experiences. Plus, I feel still green in artistic sense.
Green, you mean like unexperienced?
Yes, yes.
Aha.
And in that way, I have some kind of how to say somehow I know there is someone who is rooting for me, someone who is here to say to me you can do it, you don't need to give up.
Mm-hmm. To encourage you and to support
yes,
you.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. But when you say exchange, is this exchange only one way? Because you said those who have more experience, then you can get and learn from them. Is it only one way, or is it also two ways? Do you also offer something, and do you also lead the others to follow your ideas and your proposals?
Yes, I think in a sense I give others experience also because for example when they talk to me in the workshops, for example, they are learning about my experiences and also about my thoughts. and also about what I like, what I don't like. For example, why I like horror that much. How is it not scary for me?
Mm-hmm. But when you say, Dalibor, that you are unexperienced, or how you say green, because in our language we use this term to say that you are not experienced. I somehow would say that it is also not true, because you have already now at least 8 years of experience of being on stage, on performing, on also experience about talking on your behalf, for yourself and also for our group. So there is experience. And when you say this, it reminds me also of something that when we worked on We Are Not Monsters, it was the first time for all of us to work in that way with so many other collaborators who also come from different countries and who have different experiences. And this was a very new and kind of green experience for all of us. Yes. How do you see that situation when it comes then? What do you think is important when we all experience this new situation for the first time, but we are there to work together?
For example, I think when we are exchanging new experiences with new people, I think the first thing that comes up in my mind, what is important is that we need to meet and know each other. Plus, it is also important to listen to each other. And I think it is also important to know before about each other. Mm-hmm. In a sense, yes. that for example, I think it is not good to for example it is not good to meet the artist unexpectedly, without explanation, without what to say,
some very important information or aspects of artists.
Plus, yes, unexpectedly meet another artist because
yes. So then we can consider everybody's conditions and needs and states of being, so we can then work better together, you mean?
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm. Especially, for example, us disabled persons, for example, there are lots of different disabled artists with different thoughts, different reactions to new things, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I just this, sorry now, because I had one question to ask you, but now when you say this, it just made me think, because, for example, we are now talking about us artists, and this what you say about getting to know about each other and preparing in advance so we can know with whom we are working. What do you think, for example, for people who are directors of theaters, of museums, of festivals, who create programs to invite artists? Is this also important for them to have this information, and in which way to make this? Or you think this is not important, this is only the matter for artists?
I think it is also important for directors, because if the director doesn't know artist very well, then the whole thing can look like it is too much forced. Forced in a sense that that for example, I think that the fourth performance would look like that the artists are unhappy with the conditions they are doing, you know, and that conditions that are seen in the stage can raise many questions. But it also can raise a question: is this their part in the performance that they are look, for example, desperate, or you know,
or the situation makes them feel desperate, but then they have to still do their job and pretend that they are not desperate.
Yes, yes.
This is interesting because everything that happens around us and how we experience making the performance, it also then makes us feel in a certain way. So if something, this is interesting for me to hear what you say. If, for example, conditions are forced on us and we don't feel good about doing it in that way, and we still have to do it, there is this problem that then on the long term, it makes us, as you say, desperate or exhausted, I would say, or unhappy. And then we have a problem with how we work, but also how we live.
Yes.
This is a good point, I think, which you are making, that for us, artists, but also then directors of theaters and festivals, that we need to insist on discussing with them that these ways of communicating and setting conditions should change, and that it can be in this way, how you say, that there is information and preparation and time and enough people, enough access, that we can do it in a way.
Yes.
Yeah, that it makes us also all feel happy, and I would also say fulfilled and proud of what we do. I know, Dalibor, that in the last several months, you were also busy. You were working on some ideas also related to We Are Not Monsters topic and performance. Right before the pandemic, I asked Marcel and you to go back to these texts that last year you created together with Marcel Bugil. You had many sessions in the working process where Marcel and you would, after discussions that we had, you would sit down and then you would dictate your thoughts and your ideas, and Marcel would write them down. So there were many texts that were created, and many of them didn't enter the performance, how to say. And these texts that stayed as some kind of archive, I asked Marcel and you to go back to them and to work a bit more on them. And then we had this situation with the virus and pandemic, and then you had to stay at your apartment in Novi Sad, and Marcel was in Berlin in his apartment, but you managed to work together. Can you a little bit say about how you worked, how many times, and what was this process?
Okay, I will tell, but not too much. We don't want spoilers. So, because of this pandemic situation, Marcel and I were forced to have online workshops. So in the beginning, it was every 3 days, because we needed to adjust our schedules and our needs for preparations and things like that. But later was somehow lesser times, because Marcel has lots of work to do. And I will tell you about the project that I'm working on, but just a little bit.
Yes, no spoilers, as you say, so
yes.
We can keep it for when it is presented, but maybe you can tell us what it is, these texts, what it is about.
These texts are about my thoughts about the monsters, and Marcel and I, also with the help of our colleague Rosina, are working in the project. How should it look if I was lecturing about the monsters?
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you just that. I don't want to spoil it.
Yes. Okay. And tell me, this way of working online, it is a new way for most of us. How was this, or how is this experience for you? Did you learn something new in this way of working? And do you see some advantages and or disadvantages? How is it for you?
If I think about online workshops, for example, first I think about advantages. And advantages are that for example, I can have a workshop from my home, where I can think about things the best. Plus, also I can sleep more.
Mm-hmm. So you can have your the rhythm that suits you more in your home or in your private space. Yes,
and also I'm not thinking about what should I wear. For example, what should I wear when I will have this workshop, or should I or would I be late to the bus, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like there is less pressure.
But this workshop that you say, this is still private, because it's only between you and Marcel and Frosina or one more person. It's not open for public, right?
Yes. But now I was thinking, what are the disadvantages? And disadvantages are that for example, sometimes online connection is not steady enough. So sometimes I don't hear all the words, and I need to be more patient, more concentrated, more, how to say, tolerant than usually.
And in this what you point as a problem, then it is. I agree with you, because over the last months, it was experiencing these problems. It was also very important to find a way how we can then support each other, to make sure that some of our colleagues who didn't have internet connection, that they get the internet connection, or those who didn't have smart mobile phones, that they can get them, so they can be in contact with the whole group, and that they can also take part in other workshops or other moments when we communicate and support each other. So these are points that you are mentioning that actually are important, again, to see what is it that we need to provide in order to work if we work online.
Yes.
And I also know that from the moment then when there was no curfew in Novi Sad and in Serbia, because in Serbia it was a very different situation than, for example, in Berlin and in Germany, because in Serbia you had a long time with the curfew, and there were also moments when for 4 days you were not allowed to leave the house, people in Serbia. So it was very difficult. And I know from the moment when the curfew was stopped, soon also museums opened, or at least some of the museums opened. And I know that 2 weeks ago or so, you went together with Frosina and Olivera, our colleagues, you went to Gallery of Matica Srpska to work and meet there. How is this? I was asking myself, and I would like to use this opportunity to ask you also here, how was this experience, and how does it look like now? Are there any special measures, and how people relate to each other, and how do you work in a museum when it's open again?
First thing that I think about that is different. The difference is that I see there is less people in the museum because I think that there is a limit how many people can be in one place. Plus they also need to integrate or use, how to say, social distancing measures, also wear masks and gloves. But for example, because when there is rehearsals with Frosina and me, because we are just two persons, we were having workshops without masks and gloves. Mm-hmm. Because I one time, or maybe few times, I was asking myself, how should I work on my project with mask and gloves? And there is a small difference that maybe it is more important to others than me. I don't know, because in these times it is appropriate to wash hands more than usually. Mm-hmm. So every time that I go into in our museum space, I'm aware of that I need to wash my hands before I continue. Plus, the other difference is that Frosina and I were need to have some sort of social distancing that is also appropriate for this.
Is this, all these measures, are they distracting for the creative process?
No, they are not distracting because Frosina and I are working in a big room, and also we can have a conversation from with no problems with social distancing. But now that I mentioned this, I don't know, maybe should I tell or not? I was questioning myself, what about for those that, for example, cannot hear very well.
Mm-hmm. In which way? You mean because of the intensity of the sound of the voice?
Yes, because of the intensity and also because and also I was thinking, what about the people that cannot understand that these social measures must be executed?
Mm-hmm. Yes, like you mean how to not force what you were saying earlier, like how not to force these measures if someone doesn't understand what are the measures, like
Yes.
how not to discipline even more these people.
Yes, that is a really good question. How to discipline them, but in a nice kind of way.
But when we are mentioning this being disciplined on its own, it's a problem, because now we see, especially how it was for several months in Serbia, there was like a very strict request to and intention to discipline people and regulate what they can do, when they can do, and so on. And this is at the same time scary for me.
Yes, it is. Well, for me, it's not that scary. It was just a bit problematic for me. The example is that I love to sleep more than usual.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was going to market, I needed to get up early to buy what to eat, for example.
Mm-hmm. And this work that you are now developing with Marcel and Frosina is also Frosina Dimovska, our colleague from Per.Art, also joined you recently in the rehearsals. I asked you to work on this because of something that I'm preparing. Hopefully, it will take place in Berlin. As I told you, it's like I'm imagining it to be like some kind of symposium of artists, where I would like to invite artists with learning disabilities to come and give lectures and presentations and perform something about their artistic practice and their way of working and thinking. Unfortunately, I know over all these years, I see that many people who make decisions who can be an artist and who can have chance to make artistic work. Most of them, they think that artists with learning disabilities, they cannot give a lecture, or they cannot think about how they want to work, or with whom they want to work, or that they cannot talk about their experience of performing and making performances. And I think this is a big problem. And you know that in Per.Art, in the last 20 years, we are working to make this possible, that each one of us can become an artist and work in this field. And I would like to ask you, what do you think about this problem? And maybe to be then more specific, how do you understand this? What does it mean for you to have a lecture performance, and how do you understand this term lecture performance, and how do you think of it, and what does it mean, and is it true that this format is not something that our colleagues with learning disabilities can also take and work with and find their own ways to give lectures and present their work?
Well, first thing that I think about it, I think it is the problem with non-disabled people in general, in a sense that for example, I'm thinking that in the schools they need to have a class how to socialize and speak with disabled persons, because many disabled people have lots of prejudices about us and about the museum artistic lecture. I think that that way I can make some kind of revolution in a sense that that more people would know about our work, our way of thinking. Plus, I think they will realize that we all are not so different at all.
When you say revolution, you think that lecture as a format, as a way to speak in public, can be still revolutionary?
Well, yes, but just in a sense of us disabled persons, because there is not that much examples about disabled persons giving lectures.
Mm-hmm. And this is interesting what you say. It makes me think, and I would like to ask you what, if you say that in this way it's revolutionary if people or artists with disabilities, they do lectures, and this is revolutionary. Is there a revolutionary potential for non-disabled artists to give a lecture? What would they need to do with lectures to claim that they are revolutionary? Do you understand what I mean?
Yes, I understand, but I really don't know how to answer this question, because I didn't see many examples of artistic lectures. But I think that the other artists need to be more creative.
Mm-hmm.
I am thinking creative because there are many examples in the world of disabled arts, should I say. Many examples are about how us disabled artists can really be surprisingly creative.
And when you are mentioning the art of disabled artists, often it happens that non-disabled artists, they speak on behalf of disabled artists. And this, what you are saying about revolutionary in giving a lecture is also a way to emancipate from this relationship, that then disabled artists can also stand on their own and speak in their voice and their first person.
Yes, I'm thinking about that. I think there are examples that it is a good idea to speak in someone else's name because now I'm not thinking just about disabled persons or artists. I'm thinking about all people in general.
Mm-hmm.
There is persons that can have a big stage fright. Big stage fright in a sense that for example, the day before they are ready to come on stage. The day later they are in panic. They are really frightened and they don't have courage to go in front of a large audience.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that in a sense it is not a good idea, because that can produce wrong opinion about us disabled artists. It can produce how to say, it can produce thoughts about I meant to say wrong thoughts about us disabled artists, that we are like for example, we are like little children. We need special kind of attention always. We cannot do all the things alone and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. I understand. It is, I agree with this, that it is also about understanding the situation, and when we need to support each other, when we need to give space for someone to appear more independent and on its own, and when we should see that it is important to also speak on behalf of the others. But I would always say in that moment it's important to know that we also speak in a way that these others that we in that moment represent, that we also fight for something that is then good or better for those that we speak for.
Yes, it is important to think about what is the best way to describe this artist. What is the best way? How we should represent this artist.
Mm-hmm. And in this way that you are saying, how do you see this representation? Is it separate from the others, or is this way how to represent others, is it something that should be done together before one speaks for the others?
Well, first thing that I think about it, I think it should be done together. Why? Because if we all work together, we can produce new ideas more efficiently.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we are not working together, then all remains the same, or remains stoic. How to say?
This now, when you were talking, it reminded me of one situation that we had many years ago when we were making a performance Empty Voice, which was actually your first performance in Per.Art. And you remember we were working on this scene, your scene, and in one moment you also said that we need to think how we will present this on stage, because you don't feel confident doing it alone on your own. And then you suggested that you and we do it together.
Yes.
Remember?
Yeah.
And then I asked you, like, but in which form, in which way we can do this? And then you said, well, let's do it like how we are doing it in the process of making it in this interview form. And then we found a way that it was not you speaking about these topics that you were working on, nor that it was me, but it was this way that we did it together, and it was always open and different every time when we would do it, because it would depend on that moment in our lives, but also in relation to who were the audiences. So in that way, also this was a new format, a new way how we decided to do it.
Yes, I remember it very well.
For me to keep in mind, thank you for this observation, because for this event that I am preparing in Berlin, for me it is important to talk to all of you artists that I plan to invite, to also invite you with your long-term collaborators, or everything that it is part of how you work and how you want to present your work. So it's not like one man or one woman comes, gives a lecture, and that's the format that is, as you said earlier, is forced on the artist.
Symposium or something like that.
Yes. To also think what the symposium means today, and how we can make it that is also not only one way and normative in that way.
Yes, yes.
Let's see. I'm excited about this. I hope in the autumn or winter later this year we will be able to travel and bring everyone in Berlin. And if not, then we will need to think of other ways how we can do it. Dalibor, slowly we should come to an end of this conversation, but I just wanted to use this time, if you have in your memory, to ask you, because I did 9 conversations with different artists in the last 2.5 months. And I know that you, George, Sneža, together with Olivera and Alexandra, you were also meeting and discussing these conversations. And then you were also translating them in our language. And you were then sharing it with other members in the group who don't speak English. I think this was very important, so more people can understand what was happening. But I would like to ask you, in this process and in these previous conversations, was there something that was especially interesting or important for you as an idea, or that made you think about?
Well, the first question that I was thinking about it was the question that Perel was asked, and the question was, what is your guilty pleasure? Because I was really thinking about it because now in this forced pandemic situation, I have more free time to use.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, my guilty pleasure is that I can sleep how much I want.
Mm-hmm. But this is
And the other interesting question was the question that Yuri asked, and the question was something like, what should we do that we do not become crazy, or something like that.
Mm-hmm. But this, what you are mentioning about guilty pleasure, you know that Per.Art asked also not only what is your guilty pleasure, but do you think that we can make a revolution and how it would be with our guilty pleasures? So now when you say that you feel like that you can sleep more and that you can sleep how you want and how you feel, by doing this, do you think that this can also make a revolution and change something in the world in which we live? If people would be able to sleep whenever they want and how long they want?
Interesting question. I think there would be some things changed. There would be less panic, less tension, and also there would be more concentration.
Mm-hmm.
Or how to say, collective concentration.
Mm-hmm. This is interesting state of being, to think, to achieve. And also now when I listen to you, I also think if we would, because we usually sleep, we usually wake up at the moment when we are expected to go to work, or when we are expected to go to school, or when we are expected to show up for some meeting, and everything is around this schedule. And this often creates this, what you say, or tiredness, or not feeling concentrated because maybe we felt we need more sleep, but we have to go to work super early in the morning. So yes, I'm just
pressure also.
Hmm?
Also, tiredness can produce pressure.
Exactly. And I'm just imagining if we would follow this guilty pleasure of yours, then we would need to change also the way how we work, when we work, how we meet others. And then it's interesting to think then how would we organize our life if it would be really more up to us. When is it that we sleep? How do we use our time? And how do we organize ourselves?
Yes.
This is interesting. It would be really a big revolution.
Yes. It could be really big revolution, but there is also a problem with how long the day can last. Because I think if we all now begin to sleep however we want, things like that, there will be no time left. I think that, for example, then the day would need to be longer, like 48 hours long, not 24.
Or we would not anymore limit ourselves to 24 hours to organize our daily life, but maybe we would then operate on weekly basis. So for example, we have 1 week to do things that maybe we now do only in 1 day.
Yes, but now when you're speaking about it, that there is also a problem about our organism. How should our organism try to adapt to this new situation.
Mm-hmm. It's true. Interesting. Imagine if we would make this symposium that I am talking about, or a festival to invite artists, if we would then keep in mind this time and this organization of time, how you are describing, through this guilty pleasure that we can then sleep and rest and so on, we would need to think of it differently. How long it would be? Maybe it cannot be then 2 days, because then we don't have chance to see everyone. I don't know, it just makes me think. It's interesting way to think. And also, I remember with Pelena Keke Brown, one of the artists that I talked, she was talking about this different concept of time that is not strict, and that is not like this time that now we operate with, but that it is extended and more also close to creep time and time of that disabled artists and people with disabilities and artists with disabilities also discuss and theorize and try to fight for this different time than the one that we are now mainly operated as a standard time. It's interesting. Thank you for this, Dalibor. And maybe now for the end of this conversation, I would like to ask you, what is your question for everyone who is watching and listening to us? Because this is the last conversation in this series, so there will be no other artists that I will speak next week. So I will not bring this question to them as I usually did. But now, if you have a question for everyone, and then we can slowly finish with this.
Okay. My question is, if you were thinking about what is the positive thing from this whole situation, were you thinking about how can you continue to realize this positiveness after this crisis?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for this. Let's then leave this question for everyone to think about, and as you also say, what we all can, or how we can do something with it after the crisis, to think of what is the action that we can do, or what is it that we can do with it. Dalibor, thank you very much for this conversation. And here we can stop and finish it for today and for the whole series of In Conversation With.
Thank you, Sasha.
Bye-bye.
Bye.